I want to welcome you back to the next episode in our presentation to you about what happened at the General Conference. In the previous episode, I told you about regionalization, what regionalization is, and how the whole idea of regionalization was conceived. For those of you who may have not followed us, I was trying to help you understand that since 1972, attempts have been made to legalize homosexuality and same-sex marriage in the United Methodist Church. But every time it met with a blockade, it was defeated over and over and over again. And so in 2008, the whole concept of a Big Ten philosophy was developed by the liberals and progressives who felt that they needed to bring that as a way of providing an avenue to practice same-sex marriage and then legalize homosexuality in a certain region of the worldwide denomination. So the whole concept of the Big Ten philosophy was developed. And out of that came the regionalization plan. And of course, the regionalization plan then is, we are one big denomination called the United Methodist Church, but we think differently, we live differently, and we have different theological understanding. Some of us have a progressive theological understanding, some of us have liberal theological understanding, some of us have, conservative theological understanding. So, let us all just live like that. In order for that to happen, for us to be one United Methodist, let's have the church divided into region. So in 2008, like I said, the whole concept of the worldwide nature of the church was developed. So petitions were passed. About 32 proposed amendments were made in 2008 in Fort Worth, Texas, to change the constitution of the United Methodist Church. And of the 32 proposed amendments, 23 had to do with regionalization. And so 2009, every annual conference across the world where United Methodist is have to discuss and vote. And then we had ours in Manga, of course, and then we discussed it and we defeated it, and just like that, all across Africa was defeated. Now when that happened, we talk about what happened in 2012, how it was again defeated 2016, then 2019 we had a special, general conference section for just 1 week in St. Louis, Missouri. Now when that happened, when the defeat came, I'll tell you, for about 2 weeks, many of the boards and agencies of the United Methodist Church in America were closed down. The folks were mourning the loss. But one thing about the Americans, whether they are in a political environment or in a church environment, they are very strategic. And they plan ahead of time. They are able to analyze and see the future and know how to engage the future. So having been defeated in February, by March of 2019, they started planning for the general conference that will have happened 2020 and thinking about how to engage that. So they formulated lots of plans. I don't have the time to discuss them, that never work. Even some that were trying to work, at the end of the day, they abandoned it because they were thinking about how they can eventually win. But another issue that they had to reckon with was Africa. Africa is growing in number, but Africa is also growing in her understanding of the church. The structure in front of the church, Africa understands it now. Africa delegates come to general conference. They are taking the role as secretary, or vice chair, chairperson. They are leading legislative committees. They are articulating the issues on the floor. How can we, try to overcome this hurdle so that we have our way? Our numbers are plummeting. We are reducing, but Africa is increasing in population. So they still formulated the plan to ensure that America still had a larger delegation coming to the General Conference. However, a larger part of American delegates were conservative. And so they're combining with the conservatives from Africa and few from the Philippines and Europe, as well as the Eurasia area. We always won the day. So they said, we have to break through the ranks of the annual conferences in Africa. So all of the partners that had partnership with conferences in Africa started designing ways. And one of the things they decided to do was to make sure they can have African bishops disengage with the Africa Initiative. That was now this strong, powerful voice that was speaking on behalf of the African church and bringing all the delegates under one umbrella. As a result, when we went to the general conference, we voted as a bloc, and they did not like that. Because we are conservative, we had similar values, and so we wanted to vote consistent with our understanding of the Bible. So they started working their way through. And one of the things they started doing, the liberals and progressive bishops in America, they started talking to bishops in Africa. They say, is the Africa Initiative now the bishop in Africa? They are speaking for you because they know that in Africa we have the chieftaincy mentality regarding leadership. Where the leader is always right, and when the leader says something, the honor man does not say anything or will not react or whatever. So they started poisoning the minds of African bishops against their delegates, especially Africa Initiative. Now, you also have to understand that the American church, the UMC in America, has designed the church in such a way that they make the rest of the UMC, whether in Europe or Asia and Africa, to be dependent upon them. So they spend more money. All the boards and agencies established in America, they provide more funding to the boards and agencies. And they don't bother themselves about helping to build the capacity of the other annual conferences in Africa to be independent or interdependent, but they make them dependent upon them. So the American UMC supports the worldwide UMC with 99% of all the resources needed, to the extent that they have an Episcopal fund that pays all the bishops across the world, including the 13 Episcopal leaders in Africa. They do not only pay their salaries, but they take care of their offices and all their transportation needs in Africa. And so, capitalizing on that, they started putting pressure on the African bishops to disengage from Africa Initiative. And so we became very vocal and we began to speak out. In fact, the general conference, we will have opportunity where we'll speak and you can hold interviews and all of that. So, on behalf of the UMC in Africa, as the head of the African delegates, we started engaging some laborers. And one of the main liberal leaders in America and myself had some exchanges, email exchanges. And so when I wrote him, I said, you know what, Abing? The general conference has finished, and we have the conservative agenda to run the UMC worldwide. If you're not happy with that, you can leave and go and form your own liberal denomination. The guy got so angry, he took my communication and mailed it all around the world, where you have United Methodists saying to them, you see, this fellow who always speaks on the floor of the general conference from Liberia, he has said that we should leave the church. While we are trying to pursue unity, he's trying to have us divided. Now our money is going to Africa and promoting their institutions and promoting capital projects. Now he's telling us to leave and try to incite other people against not only the Africa Initiative, but even the Liberia Annual Conference. To the extent that the secretary of the German church is highly, highly liberal, very liberal. So the German church secretary went ahead and wrote to the bishop in Liberia. He said, well, I want to know whether the position of Jerry Kula is the position of the United Methodist Church in Liberia, because that will determine as to whether we can continue our partnership with you or not. Now, no one in America asked, Mark Holland, this fellow whom I have been exchanging emails with, as to whether all of the rubbish he was saying about Africa and insulting African delegates, and even saying that we will go with our money and let them go with their votes, saying they didn't support us, let them go with their vote, we'll go with our money. Nobody quavered him. Not even one African bishop confronted him. But this German bishop or the secretary had the audacity to engage the Liberian Annual Conference, just to tell you the pressure they were exerting upon the annual conference in Africa, because money has become the factor to determine whether we will remain true to the gospel or whether we bow to them. Of course, the annual conference said that, well, Jerry's opinion cannot be the opinion of the Liberian Annual Conference, just as the other guy and Jerry interchanged emails and spoke on issues regarding the politics of the church as their personal opinion. That cannot be considered as our opinion, so you don't have the right to even ask us that kind of question. But that was very humiliating for the Liberian Conference. Just to let you know that the folks believe that because they have more financial resources, they can determine what we do and what we don't do. But those were some of the beginnings of trying to persuade African bishops against their annual conferences for what we stand for our conservative stand. Now, this is very critical to understanding regionalization as it happened at the recent General Conference. And so, as we went on, of course, the COVID-19 came, so we could not have General Conference 2020. And then they pushed it to 2021. When 2021 came, COVID was still around to some parts of the world anyway, and then they postponed it to 2022. Now, when they postponed it to 2022, by 2022, COVID has almost subsided everywhere, especially across Africa. COVID has become a history. And in America, predominantly, COVID has become a history to the extent that major international meetings that brought together hundreds of people were happening in the United States. And the same 2022, the women division of the United Methodist Church met in Florida and had their general conference. However, the Council of Bishops refused to have the General Conference 2022. And it was all because they were trying to buy more time to work with African bishops and ensure that African bishops disengaged from our Africa Initiative and kept their delegates away so that they can enter the ranks. So it was more like divide and rule. And then they began to indirectly pressure them because, if you don't comply with your partner there, you either lose the financial gifts that will come, you either lose the support to your major capital projects, and things like those. Then, so as a result, they were going ahead and doing all of that and pressurizing them. Surprisingly, 2020, the bishop from Sierra Leone, who was the president of the College of Bishops of Africa, passed away. And so the African College of Bishops did not meet 2019, they did not meet 2020, they did not meet 2021. By 2022, they met. They gathered at the Africa University. When they gathered at Africa University, what was their agenda? Unfortunately, they did not concentrate on their president that passed away to even have a little memorial service for him. Nothing. And many of them could not even go to the funeral. We had to go to Sierra Leone for the funeral. They could not cross over to come because some of them were fearing COVID when it happened in 2020. So 2022, African bishops are meeting for the first time, and they said nothing about the late Bishop John K. Yambasu. Neither did they have a memorial service for him. But all their deliberations focus on the Africa Initiative, headed by the Zimbabwean bishop. What were the issue? They said, what thing? Africa Initiative is associated with the Wesleyan Covenant Association. Africa Initiative is associated with the Global Methodist Church. And the Global Methodist Church is trying to bring division in the church, in the UMC. So since we are not associated with the GMC, we cannot work with the Africa Initiative. Africa Initiative will no longer work in any of our annual conferences. And that was the very agenda of the liberal progressives in America. About 80% of the bishops in America are progressive. And that's exactly what they wanted, to make sure that the African bishops can turn their backs on the Africa Initiative that have been providing training and education for their delegates and preparing them to engage at General Conference. And so they sent a letter all over the place, certifying their masters. And I will refer to that as their colonial masters. And that is what we call neocolonialism. Neocolonialism, where you are here acting against your own people based upon the demands and dictates of people who are somewhere else. The colonial masters are no longer here. They are back home, but their political presence, their economic presence, are here, influencing what happened. That is what happened. Few of the bishops, according to them, did not vote, but they did not have the audacity or, the courage to write a pastoral letter and say, what we have done to Africa Initiative is a betrayal. They did not say that. They left everything like that. And so the progressive bishop won the day. And as a result of that, bishops in Africa started keeping their delegates away from Africa Initiative. And so they started trying to keep them away. And so we could not meet, we could not plan, we could not discuss as we were doing before. So, when we gathered there, preparing for the 2022, and they said no, it's been postponed to 2024, then all the evangelicals in America left the church because they could not tolerate any of this anymore. They left and they formed the Global Methodist Church. That one reason why, like I said earlier, we were defeated at the recent General Conference because our numbers were very few compared to all the liberals and progressives that came. Now, so that was the regionalization plan. So then the next thing they did to the African bishops were to mandate them to support the regionalization plan. So 2023, just before we could go to General Conference, the African bishops gathered in Lubumbashi and voted to support the regionalization plan, a plan that they have not discussed with their annual conferences, a plan that their annual conference knew little or nothing about, except for some also were reading what was happening in the global space. And so when we went to General Conference, many of the folks were ignorant of what happened at General Conference about regionalization. So they could not vote for it or against it. So someone just sat down and just left it like that. Or someone voted not knowing that they were voting for regionalization. And some of the bishops in Africa had their delegates voting under duress, compelling them to support the American agenda against Africa. What made regionalization different from 2024, when it was defeated 2008, 2012, 2016, and 2019? If this was not an influence from the U.S. progressive and liberal bishops. So, this is what they presented to us. They went ahead and said the current regionalization plan, they organized it in such a way that they said, well, the denomination will be divided into 9 regional conferences. What did they do? Africa had 3 central conferences. The West Africa Central Conference, the East Africa Central Conference, and the Congo Central Conference. But they went and introduced a new Central Conference in Africa, making us 4. Then they went ahead, so now you have 4 Central Conferences in Africa, you have 3 Central Conferences in Europe, and you have one Central Conference in the Philippines. That's in Asia, the Philippines in Asia, and then one central conference, one regional conference in the United States. So they said 9 regional conferences. 4 will be in Africa, 3 will be in Europe, 1 will be in Asia, 1 will be in America. Very soon you will see the huge disparity. Now, what does this mean? It means that the 5 jurisdictions. Now, a jurisdiction is equal to a central conference. So the 5 jurisdictions in America will come together and form one region. So in reality, you have 5 regions in America. Just like you have the divided Africa, even smaller, and made it 4 regions, all right, the central conferences, and each of the central conferences will form a region. But in America, they took the 5 jurisdictions and made them one region. So you have one region in Africa contending with the so-called one region in America, when actually it's 5-1. So look at the board. You have the North Central jurisdiction. See the number of states in which you have annual conferences that make up the central jurisdiction. In West Africa, you only have four conferences: Nigeria annual conference, Sierra Leone annual conference, Cote d'Ivoire annual conference, that will be for the left, and then Liberia annual conference. 4. But look at just one central conference that they call jurisdiction. You have the North Central jurisdiction, including all these states: Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Michigan, Minnesota, North Dakota, Ohio, South Dakota, and Wisconsin. All of them have annual conferences. Then you come to the second one. The second one, you have what? The Northeastern jurisdiction. Now, the Northeastern jurisdiction also includes several states. You have Delaware, you have Maine, you have Maryland, you got Massachusetts, you got New Hampshire, New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, Vermont, West Virginia, and the District of Columbia. Now, all of these have annual conferences. Then you move on to the other 3. You have the South Central jurisdiction. It has all the other annual conferences under it. You have the Southeastern jurisdiction. You have all the other annual conferences under it. Then you have the Western jurisdiction that also have all the other annual conferences under it. How can you bring all of these together to form one region? Then the 3 central conferences in Africa, you make them 4, and you separate all of them to each form a region. How can they ever contend with the one region in America? Then in America, you have all the boards and agencies. And all the boards and agencies in America are headed by Americans. So they're controlling the entire show. How can a region in Africa or Europe or Philippines not submit to the demands of America? When it's 5 jurisdictions now from one region, and they are controlling all the resources, they are controlling all the boards and agencies. This is a huge disparity, and this is nothing short of divide and rule. It's nothing short, because the American church is plummeting. You don't have members. All the young people gone from the church because you've engaged into homosexuality and lesbianism. And only old folks in most of the churches. I know about the Georgia area where you have over 200 churches worshiping less than 25 members. And most of the churches are up for sale, are up for closure. But still, you want to present yourself to have more delegates at General Conference against the other regions, because you call yourself one region. And you call yourself one region so that you are there to practice homosexuality, same-sex marriage, and nobody can say anything about what to do because you are a region on your own. So the regionalization plan is very, very horrible. Regionalization requires that each region to be governed by its own book of discipline, based on its own context. Then there will be a general book of discipline that brings all of us together. Now, where do you have a denomination in this world that will have 9 different constitutions, 9 different book of discipline that govern each region separately, and no one region have any authority to say anything to the other region? For us, we see this as, regionalizing sin. Because in Africa, for example, or in Liberia, we will say same-sex marriage is wrong. But in America, it says same-sex marriage is right. LGBTQ person becoming pastor in the church in Africa will say, no, that can't happen. But in America, that will happen. So we're preaching different gospel. This is the evil of regionalization. And folks who don't understand it are running with it and saying that regionalization is good. You can bring your social political ideas and say, when you are regional, you are autonomous, you can do stuff. Who told you we have not been autonomous? Who told you we have not been operating as an autonomous body? Who told you that? Now, if you go into our book of discipline, paragraph 243, okay? There are many passages in the book of discipline that tell you that we have been operating from a regional perspective. And so here, I can read for you paragraph 243 that talks about how the church functions within a local context. So here it says, paragraph 243, it says that the local church shall be organized so that it can pursue its primary task and mission in the context of its own community, reaching out and receiving with joy all who will respond, encouraging people in their relationship with God and inviting them to commitment to God's love in Jesus Christ, providing opportunity for them to seek strengthening and growth in spiritual formation, and supporting them to live lovingly and justly in the power of the Holy Spirit as faithful disciples. So, do we need a new regionalization plan? Already we are being operating within a regional context. If you go up country, all of the folks are singing in the Basa language, in the Pele language, in the Kru language. Even whether you go to Trinity UMC, most of the songs are in Kru. Even to read the Gospels in the Kru language. You go to the Pele churches that do the same thing. So we're already serving the Lord within regional context. However, we are committed to the Holy Bible, the teachings of the Holy Bible. But regionalization is saying, have your own constitution, do ministry based upon your culture and context, okay, as if to say that has not been happening before. So the motive behind regionalization is to go ahead and be under this Big Ten, the Big Ten philosophy, where we are one church, but with different constitution and practicing different things based upon our culture. So for the American culture, saying homosexuality is legalized, okay, they practice homosexuality. Since same-sex marriage, is legalized, they do that. Since lesbians and transgenders are normal lifestyle for them, they bring them in the church. But the church must be different because we are the light of the world. We are the salt of the earth. We cannot be on equally yoked together with unbelievers. We cannot. So the Bible says, come out from among them, be ye separate. Present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God, because this is your spiritual act of worship. And be not conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your minds. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is good, pleasing, and perfect will. So each annual conference will ratify this at a special section or at its annual conference. And that is what we have been expecting the Liberia Annual Conference to do since we came from the General Conference. So I want to close with a deception of the regionalization plan. If the regionalization plan is ratified, in other words, if we went ahead and voted in favor of the regionalization plan, no regional conference will be permitted according to law. Okay, to be permitted to change the following parts of the book of discipline of the United Methodist Church. The parts that will not be changed, you got part 1 and part 2 that talk about the constitution within the general book of discipline. In other words, the general book of discipline say everything that will pass regarding homosexuality and same-sex marriage are all there. All right? I will share with you more. The general book of discipline legalizes adultery and fornication. There is no more fidelity in marriage and singleness and celibacy. It has removed everything from the current book of discipline. It has removed celibacy in singleness. It has removed fidelity in marriage. So pastors are no longer accountable, to living a decent life as models of the Church of Jesus Christ. So part 2. So there is a deception. How can you say we regionalize, then you have these laws there, so don't change it? Then part 3, the doctrinal, steno, and theological texts, don't touch it. But you've gone and changed our doctrine to say that marriage is now a relationship between a man, a woman, and 2 persons of faith. So these are deception. The next one that said we should not touch is part 4, okay, of the book of discipline. The ministry of all Christians. and then the new social principle. So we've had the first social principle that was highly conservative, but they removed several of the languages from there, including this whole idea about marriage. They changed the definition of marriage, different from what the Bible says. The Bible says, therefore shall man leave his father and mother and cleave to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So the Bible defines marriage as a relationship between a man and a woman, and not any two persons of faith. Because any two persons of faith could be a man, a woman and a woman, just to promote same-sex marriage. You know, a man or woman, or even a man and his daughter who has passed 18 years and she's of consenting age. A woman and her son. So, I mean, there is no limit to what it can go. So that's the reason why regionalization is wrong, and we need to keep to the teachings of the Bible. That's the reason why I say, meanwhile, all these parts within the general book of discipline have been changed to reflect the liberal and progressive theology. Now, it's important that folks who don't know anything about regionalization take their time. Don't run with something you don't know. Unfortunately, some of you have not even been to a central conference before I talk about going to general conference as a delegate. So how can you be running with something that you don't know? Our bishops are under tremendous pressure by the Council of Bishops to ensure that regionalization passes in the different annual conferences. That's the reason why some bishops are compromising their faith. They are compromising their biblical and theological stance that they have always stood for to try to promote and support regionalization, not knowing that some of us know because we've been around for a long time. We've been engaged with the process. And so today, we can't have folks coming to tell us to compromise our faith. And like I said to somebody, by the grace of God, some of us have been walking with Jesus for many decades now. Some of us have been walking with Jesus for me for 47 years. Since 1977, I gave my life to Jesus. And nothing, absolutely nothing, not even the institution called the United Methodist I belong to, will cause me to compromise my faith. I stand for Jesus Christ today and forever. And so I encourage you to stand for Jesus also, because everything else will pass away. Only what is done for Christ will last. And remember, the Bible said no one should add or subtract. To promote regionalization is to add to the Bible what is not there. United Methodist in Liberia, Africa, and other parts of the world, I encourage you to vote against regionalization because it is not new. It appeared 2008, 2012, 2016, and 2019. Only now, 2024, it passed because most of the evangelicals have left to form a part of the global Methodist Church. So I plead with you to stand for Jesus. This thing has nothing to do with title, has nothing to do with position. It all has to do with your faith. If you know Jesus, stand for Jesus. But thank you very much for listening. I look forward to seeing you at our next episode. Thank you.